pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you. So this morning, our legislators will be introduced by our moderator in a few minutes, but I do want to thank Representative Siegrist and Senator Dawson for being here. I spoke with Representative Windschitl earlier this week. He has one of two legislative forums in Harrison County that he was in this morning, so he's unable to be here, and Representative Turek is out sick. There's a lot of things going around the Capitol. I want to thank our sponsors, Black Hills Energy and the Southwest Iowa Association of Realtors, as well as the Southwest Iowa Corporation for helping us make this happen. And thank you to Dr. Vicki Murillo and her team at the school district for hosting us today. We added something on the back of the question cards. Last coffee, we're not able to get to all the questions, so if we're not able to get to your question today and you want a follow-up from Brent or Dan or even Josh or Matt that are not here, write on the back of the card your phone number and who you'd like that card to be delivered to. I'll make sure that we get that and they will follow up with you on your question. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator. This year, our moderators for the legislative coffees are community members who have been current participants or alumni of the Leadership Council Plus program. Leadership Council Plus is a 9-month program offered by the Chamber of Commerce that's designed to help develop leaders within our community. Participants in the program learn about the rich history of Council Plus, develop leadership skills, examine critical issues and local challenges that we're facing, and discover opportunities to become more involved in our community. So at this time, please help me welcome today's moderator, Kelsey Stuckfeld. Kelsey is Director of Public Relations at TS Banking Group and a graduate of Leadership Council Plus, Class 23.
Good morning. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so you guys kind of know the format. We're going to be a similar format to what we've done in past events. We'll do a quick round of introductions with Dan and Brent, and then we'll be following with some questions. So we all know to keep it respectful. We have our representatives, but they're also our neighbors and community members. So with that, we'll just keep things moving and get kicked off. So Dan, do you want to start?
Sure. Dan Dawson, Senate District 10 now, which is all of Carter Lake and most Council Bluffs. I begin my 9th year in the Iowa Legislature. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee. I chair that committee. I also sit on the Judiciary, Veterans Affairs, and New Committee this year is Admin, Rules, and Regulations Committee. I apologize for not being here last time. I was saying up front here, my National Guard annual training actually landed in February this year, so it's out of pocket a little bit. I don't know what Brent covered last time, but we are quickly approaching the first funnel here at the state capitol. And what the first funnel is that any member can introduce a bill, and for that bill to remain alive, it has to make it out of the appropriate committee here within 2 weeks. So there's a lot of bills coming out there. We were happy to meet the leadership CD group this week. And I don't know what the number is, but we were told by our legislative services agencies, for those are individuals who draft all bills, that this might be one of the all-time highs for bills being filed, which not necessarily is a great thing. So there's a lot of, we have a lot of new members up there with a lot of ideas that they are bringing in. Some are ideas that we've dealt before, but whenever you're new, you show up and maybe it's the first time anyone's ever heard the idea. So we're trying to work through a lot of those things there. As I probably just give the preemptive warning, you might have questions about bills out there that you might be very well aware of, but I just ask for a little grace up here because frankly, like if we're not on the committee, it's not like one of the top bills we're talking about at this moment, we frankly won't know what it is. So we're just glad the funnel's important, right? Kind of, filters out some of those bills that just don't quite have the oomph this year, and then we try to come back on next year. So, but early in the process, there's a lot of movement going on, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Brent Siegrist, House District 19, which is part of Council Bluffs. This is not okay. Part of Council Bluffs. Representative Turek represents the other half of Council Bluffs and Carter Ray. Majority Leader Windschitl is most of his district is not. He hardly has any of Council Bluffs. He has parts of it, but he has all Harrison County. So he's at a forum up there because that's one of the things he has to do because he's spread so far and wide. He'll try to be here when he can, but he also has other forums to go to. Representative Turek texted me this morning, he's sick, so it's the two of us. If it gets too boring, I can always tell you, Josh and I are pretty close, I can talk for him too. Maybe the other side if you want, so, because I know exactly what he might say on some of these issues. As we got through before, I serve on Ways and Means, State Government, Transportation, Education Appropriations Subcommittee, Chair of the House Administration and Rules Committee, and served as Assistant Majority Leader since we last met. I was appointed to the Local Government Committee also because of the death of a member, so I'm serving on another committee, which just means more meetings, more subcommittee meetings, but that's okay. I'm happy to serve on that. As Dan said, when we go through this, there may be bills that are very important to you that we may not be totally attuned to because it's an overwhelming task. Auditor Hanusa asked me about a bill this morning that's very important to her, and I didn't know anything about it, but we agree, so that helps. But it is difficult sometimes when you're serving it and trying to focus on your committees, serving as subcommittee chairs and other subcommittees that you serve on. We have pretty good knowledge, but there may be something you ask where we're not quite in tune with that, but we do find out before we take any votes. Been pretty calm, if you will. As Dan said, we go through the winding down process, and he's absolutely right. We have passed more bill requests this year have been requested than any other year. Generally, you've heard me say it numerous times, about 2,000 bills are introduced, about 200 of them actually become law, and we're on pace to break that number of bill requests. So it is pretty busy, and then we have our funnel, our first funnel, which will be 2 weeks from yesterday. 2 weeks from yesterday, where a bill has to be out of committee, passed on the floor and over to the Senate, or vice versa, to keep it alive, with the exceptions of tax bills and appropriation bills. So there'll be a lot of committee time coming up this week, and there's been a lot of committee time right now. As Dan said, we did have Council Bluffs Day on the Hill on Wednesday. Great timing, Chris, the coldest day of the year. But we had a pretty good turnout for the reception, despite the fact it really was brutally cold. Leadership Council Bluffs, we all talked to them. Representative Turek was there also. I'm pretty sure we've scared them away from ever running for elective office, but they had a lot of good questions, and we enjoyed talking to them. Other than that, some bills are coming up. We've done a little debating. Actually, since we were here last 2 weeks ago in the House, we passed about a dozen bills on Thursday, all of them pretty non-controversial, things that need to be done. But other than that, there hasn't been a lot of floor debate, but there will be in a couple of weeks. Next 2 weeks will be mostly committee work and getting ready for that first funnel.
Perfect. Any bills that are dead right now that we just need to get off the table? No?
Unfortunately, everything's still alive.
Okay.
Technically, they're still alive, but that's one thing we tell you sometimes too. If you get all cranked up about a bill, you see it. I've introduced bills that are kind of weird before too. There are a lot of bills that are introduced. They're not dead yet, but they're going to be. And what happens is the bill gets assigned, the speaker assigns the bills to committee, and then the committee chair, such as representative, I gave you a promotion, Senator Dawson, some of those, he'll tell you that you just throw them in the drawer. They're not going anywhere, but they're not dead yet. So there are a lot of bills that aren't going anywhere, but they're not officially dead yet. But before you get really shook up about something, try to text us or email us, because we might be able to tell you there's no way that's going anywhere. And then you can relax. But if it's a bill you really care about, maybe yes.
Great. Okay, so there's kind of a host of education bills right now, between the no cell phone bill in classrooms, SSA. We do have 2 specific education bills, but I wanted to just kick it. Could you guys talk about some of the current education bills, and then we'll ask these 2 specific questions.
Well, the one thing that's going on is the funding bill, SSA, School Supplemental Aid, the House and the Senate and the Governor are at odds on that. The House passed a bill, which I explained last time. I can go into detail. I don't need to, but I will if you want me to.
The governor and the Senate had a 2% SSA, which is about $102 million. The House has passed a bill at 2.25, which is about an additional $12 million. Plus, we put some money in there for transportation costs, per pupil equity, and a one-time inflation factor of about $24 million of one-time money, and something for operational sharing. We passed that bill, sent it to the Senate right now. The Senate hasn't acted on it, so that's until the Senate acts one way or another. That's where we're at on that. So the bill is alive, obviously, and I talked to a couple of superintendents this week, and they're going to build their budget based on 2% SSA, because that's for sure going to happen. I'm hoping it'll be higher, and if it's higher, then the superintendent school districts will be able to use that money and do something with it that they need to do. So that hasn't moved much. And for the cell phone policy, that had some difficulty in the Education Committee the other day, I understand. The governor has recommended a cell phone policy basically that says no cell phones in schools, which in general terms I support. They are clearly a distraction. We both have our phones up here, but that's because my daughter's in Guatemala. In case she ever calls, I want to make sure I can answer. But they are a distraction, but there's a local control issue, so I'm not sure where that's going to end up. But I think at a minimum, the legislature will tell school districts, you have to have a cell phone policy. What it is, you decide, but you need to have something that does cut down on cell phone use, and that way the school districts can go do whatever they want it to be, tailored to what their needs are, but at least you have to recognize that cell phones are a distraction.
Yeah, and for those new here, I always.
No, I do not say that.
So, there are some committees that we're on that our person might not be, so we'll kind of let their person take a lead on that here a little bit. I do not sit on education. I can tell you from the overall budget standpoint, from the education funding, yes, it'll be anywhere between 2 and 2 1/4 here. I think where the discussion comes, and this is something that happens every year, but just a bigger difference this year, is on the non-categoricals, whether it be transportation, people equity, things that Brent mentioned here. So on that's where, additional monies come into the school. I think the overall House package is like 3.7%. So when you hear like 2 1/4%, that's not really all accurate, because we're looking at a bunch of different things there for the overall education spending. The Senate is obviously lower than that, probably about $40 million. Not that the House has a bad spending proposal, but the one frustration we always have every year is just trying to build a budget, because we have to set, it's behoove us to get education funding levels out the door, because the schools have a reverse calendar planning on how to set their budgets. It's with public hearings, post levy notices, so on and so forth. But fortunately, the state doesn't get our budget number until March 15th, which is when, or thereabouts, when the RNC comes out. I'm not going to give a huge budgeting class for everyone. We'll probably talk about that a couple more forums. But ultimately, when this March number comes out, this is our overall number of what we can build a budget off of. So it's always kind of complex every year, a little bit. Frankly, we pull our hairs out every once in a while, because, you could certainly take the House number, but then the question becomes, what type of visibility we have on the rest of the budget, where it comes to Medicaid, prisons, parks, things like that. That's where it's kind of like, and not that we're closing our eyes blind and throwing a dart on the board, but it's always kind of those things here, trying to make sure, okay, there's never going to be set long to be appropriate enough where we can fund the other agencies out there a little bit. So, but yeah, so I think where the deal probably gets made is those non-categoricals. We'll just have to kind of go from there, and being we're at, overall spending 3.7%, but the base SSA would be between 2 and 2 1/4. So on cell phones, I've been very supportive of that. I guess I'm not on education committees, so I really am not attuned to what discussion there was this week on it. I absolutely appreciate the local control argument, but at the same time too, our kids are in a classroom to learn, and I think anything that we can do to help give the local school districts the ability to make sure they're in there to learn helps us out in the end, right? Because the reality for the biggest problem for a lot of superintendents is they don't have a lot of overhead air coverage, if you will, pardon the military term. They don't have a whole lot of overhead coverage from the state. You don't want to try to embark on a policy because you have 330 some school districts out there with individual policies. And I think it's one of those things that if we could try to come in with some uniform policy out there and help everyone out, much else at the local level. And most importantly, I think it's going to help the students in the end, right? You know, we don't want to sever a kid entirely from a cell phone and you get whole parents along those lines. But I think we all know, I mean, anyone who has kids know that these things can just be too much of a distraction if there aren't good rules in place. So I hope that's something that has some teeth in it, that can actually help our superintendents out and our school boards make some good policy. Because, you know, get the kids focused where we always want to be focused is learning and building a bright future.
Just a quick follow-up on education, but Jan mentioned something pretty important. So when the governor proposes the bill, then you've got your pie, and the money's in there. So her recommendation is for 2% SSA, that's about $104 million. If we were to pass, as the House did, 2.25%, that's an additional $12 million. And somewhere in the pie, we're going to have to take away from whatever she recommended, which, you know, you can do that. But Dan's right, there's an X amount of money you're going to spend, and then if you move some things around from the governor's proposal, which we always do, then you've got to adjust elsewhere. So every one of the decisions we make has ramifications throughout the budget, which is why we try to do education up front, because it's generally the biggest part. The second biggest part is Medicaid and health services, and so we need to do that so we can figure out where else we move around. And we're set by the Revenue Estimating Conference, which is a 3-person group that meets 4 or 5 times a year, and they tell us what they think the budget projections are going to be, and they're pretty good at it. And then whatever that number is, we can spend 99% of that, so that there's always a 1% cushion. And so the governor built her budget on the December Revenue Estimating Conference number, the REC number, and they meet again, that's what I was looking up, I wasn't being rude on my phone. March 14th, they meet again. And then we kind of wait for that second one in March, because if they lower the number, if the economy tanks, something like that, then the governor has to lower her budget to whatever that number is. So we use the December estimate, we build the budget off that, but in March they meet. If that number goes down, then she has to readjust her budget down. If the number goes up, we don't get to spend more, it just rolls into the surplus. So kind of make sure that the best it will be is the December estimate, and it could go down from there. But everything right now that we're seeing, our revenue is going to be less than last year because of the tax cuts we've done, but they factor all that in, and our less revenue coming in is higher than we expected. How's that? So the economy is still percolating around pretty good. But we'll wait for that REC thing on March 12th, then we'll really dive into the budget because we'll know what the number will be.
Okay, here's our first official question. This comes from Jared Tripp, who is also on the library board. This is specific to the HF 274/SF235. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that bill, but it's talking about the elimination of exemption enjoyed by public libraries for the obscene materials that could be detrimental to the adult public. The question is, why would public libraries be able to keep this exemption?
Why would the public
Not be able to keep this exemption?
I think the public libraries currently do a good job. I think our library is great. I think there's the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. We've done some things to make sure that books that are perhaps not suitable for or age appropriate in our schools are not in those libraries, but the public library is just that. And so I don't know if that bill's going to move, but I think the libraries are fine the way they are.
Yes, just one on, again, if you're on the committee, I have no visibility on that one there. Certainly take a note down, see what's about there and everything, but I do know that there's quite a few bills out there swirling. Some might have merit at the same time too. I think we've been to that well once or twice. I'm not sure if there's much water there left to drink on that topic. So.
Okay, and the next one is from Doreen Cruz. This is specific to the school vouchers. Her question is, checks aren't being cut to the families directly and going into a separate account. Who's monitoring the account to determine how and when the money is being used?
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. If you were here 2 weeks ago, Representative Windschitl went through that in some detail. The ESA accounts are not vouchers. That's not what they are. It's a check that is not cut that way. So the question is, who monitors it? State Department of Education has a firm. I could tell you the name of the firm that is monitoring that. And those reports are out there. That might be based on a little kerfuffle we're having currently with the state auditor and the governor about what's about the information that's out there. I suspect in the end, all that will be released. They're just political rivals, and so they don't get along very well. But legislatively, I've seen a lot of those numbers. I couldn't tell you what they are, but it's monitored by the State Department of Education, and it's a firm that they hired to administer the program. And I'm not aware of any significant problems in that program. But the question was that's the answer. It's State Department of Education.
Okay, next one's from Diana Ostrowski, still on education. This is about preschool. She wants to thank you for all your support for high-quality preschool. The question is, would you be in favor of advocating for weighted funding? Weighted funding for preschools.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like weighted funding.
Weighted funding.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes, I would be, but again, it's the entire encompass of the budget. We currently have preschool that's offered across state. It's not weighted. Diane probably knows better than I can't remember that. Weighted like 0.5 instead of 1.0. So school districts get X amount of money to help with preschool. We have an extraordinarily positive example here in Council Bluffs, Potawatomi County. For the last 18 years, I believe, Iowa West Foundation has been given like $1 million a year to Green Hills 88 for preschool for our schools in Potawatomi County. So there's a longitudinal study, if you will, of about 18 years, which shows that the Potawatomi County students that are in preschool score higher by far than the state average. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Preschool is extremely important for the development of the child. It's kind of a pay me now, pay me later thing, because if they fall behind, it becomes special ed, let's say, because of whatever reason, that we weight that and give more than the average student gets. And so there's a cost there. So preschool funding is important. I was more hopeful. We've had several conversations with the governor about increasing and increasing that weighting for preschool. In the end, she did not put that in her budget. She did do some things for child care costs, which I fully support. Because child care is just as very important just like preschool is. But we have help for preschool for particularly poverty level students, and I think we need to do more of that, and we need to put some more funding in there because it will help. But again, we'll have to take it from someplace else in the budget. That issue is still alive. I'm not sure we'll end up on that, but there's a lot of support. It's more of a budgetary issue.
Short answer is yes, I would, for a lot of reasons that Brent described, but my only asterisk is, of course, this is always going to be a losing topic for me. We started off just talking about education funding. It's always kind of frustrating, and I'm going to lose this war every time, but what we've done over decades is we've created all these different categoricals within the education sphere, right? So, transportation, teacher supplemental salary, there's all these little moving pieces out there. And like I said earlier, around a year or two or 2.25, that's not the whole picture. It's the reality, from a house standpoint, it'd be 3.73%, right? That's the total proposed education package. So we talk about, special weighting for pre-K, that'd be like one more categorical out there. I'm just one of those persons where individually I just like wipe out all these, non-categoricals and just rip off a clean number, right? Unfortunately, it never works that way because, for a variety of reasons I won't get into there. So, less us being able to collapse all those categoricals into one SSA number, I would be in favor of that. But I always want to come back to, there's good, strong reasons why some of these side pots of money are out there and why we fund those to make sure they directly get to the purpose that everyone wants to see it done to, as opposed to an overall budget number, administrative fees, or whatever the case might be. Unfortunately, at some point, I wish we just rebuild our education budget. But that's just me. I will never win that topic, and so we will go with what we have.
But I agree with Dan. That's the situation. The Education Foundation formula was established about 60 years ago, and I guarantee you there's nobody in the legislature that understands it. I'm pretty good with the education stuff, and I still don't understand some of the stuff. I bet there are 5 people in state government that understand it. It's so phenomenally complicated. And what Dan said is we have these categoricals, and frankly, if I asked the superintendent, would you rather have all that money, we were talking about the House and SSA, so you get to decide where it goes, they'd say absolutely. I mean, I get that. So for example, one of the things we're talking about is putting another $5.8 million into per pupil equity. The foundation formula 60 years ago was established, and now there are school districts that get more per kid than other school districts. And we're trying to make that parity. Same thing with community colleges. Dr. Kenny can tell you, and the colleges are working on that. The best thing we could do is to scrap the system and start over, but again, almost impossible to do. As you've heard me say before, we put 44% of every dollar into K-12 education. That's a lot of money. 57% of every dollar goes into education as a whole. That's a lot of money. We have 435,000 public school students, and we put $3.9 billion into that. That's a lot of money, but districts are tied where they can do things and how they can spend it, and so they have shortfalls in different areas. In other places, we were just looking at cash reserve funds right now. There's like over $1 billion in cash reserve funds in school districts across the state, which makes sense, but I think Council Bluffs is like 4%, which is not enough. You should have about 10%. Other districts like 30%. And so there's a lot of money in education, but we don't get to use it where we need to use it. And so we're having more discussions. If we could collapse that into a new system, that'd be great. Very, very difficult, like property taxes, which I'm sure we talked about. But we're starting to move that way. We need to give schools as much flexibility as we can to let them decide where the money could go. But again, we're looking at categoricals this year to have money in it.
Okay, so this is a position question, just to prep you. This is from Steve Gorman. The question is, what is your position on Attorney General Byrd signing the lawsuit with 16 other states to defund federal 504 funding?
First off, I think that may have been solved now. I talked to President Turek Thursday. He had a press release from the Attorney General Byrd where he interpreted it as saying that they were pausing the lawsuit. And actually, President Turek and I met with the Attorney General on another issue on Tuesday, and we stayed behind to argue with her. What it is 504 is disability with disability tax in the code, and there is 17 states which Iowa signed on to, which I don't know. We needed to do that because the Biden administration put gender dysphoria, however you say that, into the disability code, and that's clearly not a physical disability. And so the intent was to take that out of the disability section, but the way most people read the lawsuit, it would take out section 504, which would reduce and remove all of the disability protection, and that is not what we want to do, and we can't do that. But the answer to the question is, I believe the lawsuit's been paused, is what I was told, and Representative Turek told me that. He's very up to date on that, and in which case, that's great. But we can't take the 504 section out until it has to be wrong.
All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit. This next question is, sorry, do you have something, Dan? You're not here. Okay. Okay, this is from Diane Hunter. Topics on election integrity. So the question is, the House just passed the SAVE Act, which requires a name on the voter ID to match a person's birth certificate. Since this requirement will disenfranchise the majority of married women, what will you do besides contact Joni Ernst and Chuck Grassley to ask a no to ensure that all women can vote?
So is that a congressional act? You said the House passed on Congress. If I don't know, I'm not aware of that. If it is actually true that it would be, it's not my job to be aware of that, just so you know. I'm not aware of that at the congressional level. I'm aware of what we do in Iowa, but not necessarily at the federal level, as we've said. But if it is, it actually would restrict people from voting, then I would be against that. I would certainly be willing to call them or email them to tell them that.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard of it,
Yeah.
frankly, I apologize. I mean, just like the attorneys general, they don't often run past us before they file a lawsuit in federal court, and Congress does not run past Brent or I when they pass those bills there, so. But the point of what you're saying, just like Greg said, that would not be a good thing, but I'd have to get familiarized with that there. It's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're shaking your head at me, which is fine, and I'm on the news cycle all day, I haven't heard anything, haven't read anything. So,
Has anybody heard of that?
Yes.
where?
Everywhere.
I'm serious. I'm on CNN, I haven't heard anything. Huh? Well, when I go to sleep, maybe. No, I mean, if it's an issue, I'll look at it. I'm just saying, when
Yes.
we're not dealing with it, I have not, I read 4 papers a day. I mean, I'm on Fox News, MSNBC. I mean, I watch all that. I've not heard anybody talk about it, really have. So I'll look into it. But don't shake your head like I'm some idiot. I may be an idiot, but not in this case.
Okay, you ready for the next one?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay, so this is from Cindy Hall. We have one on immigration. Question is, how will the state of Iowa determine who goes and who stays? Will there be a protection for illegal immigrants who work and pay taxes?
Well, the state of Iowa doesn't get to determine who goes and who stays. That's immigration is a federal purview. So my understanding is where the first tranche of where the federal government would like to target is those persons that have been in the country here for criminal records. State of Iowa, we can't deport anyone, and nor can we enter into immigration discussions. I mean, we're just not going to advocate for that. So I would imagine that once the Homeland Security decides to come up with a plan as to how they're going to go about targeting those persons in our country not legally with criminal records, they will probably start to brief the state of Iowa. I do know anecdotally that there are a substantial amount of people here in this state with criminal records, and there's a very real concern as to if we even have enough jail space, which I think from a pure public safety standpoint, that should be pretty concerning if we, the federal government, and again, they're working through their own system first, but just anecdotally, it might be a situation where we don't have enough jail space, not only for U.S. citizens violating crimes, but to bring in all the individuals there. So I think it's going to be a process there as to how this all goes about. But if we have, I can't say that I've actually heard an official number there, but some of the numbers that I have heard, it is concerning, I think from a public safety standpoint, how the state can actually support the federal government to get those individuals out of the criminal record. We should be doing that for all of our fellow neighbors out here. Related to the, I think the income or having a job or something like that. And again, this is a problem that has been decades in the making on immigration. The federal government needs to get its act in gear and to come up with a normalized system. But I don't think it's because you got across the southern border and you have not been identified by the federal government. I get it, if you have a job, but I don't think it's because you got here and got a job undetected means that it's home free, right? Like, we are a nation of laws, and there has to be an organized system out there. So, but I guess to circle around here, I would imagine, once Homeland Security tries to have an organized footprint across the country, we'll probably start to hear more. I haven't heard much of it, other than we do have a substantial amount of people here with criminal records in the state.
Somebody texted me a link to your previous question, so if that's what it does, it would inhibit married women voting. That's ridiculous and stupid. But I don't know. Seriously, I read everything. I don't know. I have never heard about it. But somebody sent me a link, so I'll read that and take it from there. So, going to the question, pretty much agree with everything that Senator Dawson said. It's inexcusable that Congress hasn't been able to come up with some type of compromise position, and there's guilt on both sides on that. I would say, in terms of questions that were asked, yes, the illegal criminals that are here that are currently being sent back, that's absolutely the right thing to do. I do think we need to eventually solve the Dreamer problem. I think those children that were brought here with their parents and have been here and are tax-paying citizens, which is kind of what was being talked about, should be accommodated for. And I know several people that have lived here since they're like 10 and productive citizens, and they're fearful, and that's unfortunate. I think we need to make sure we figure out a way to address the dreamer issue at a minimum and make sure those people feel safe and productive citizens, or productive members of the society in the U.S.
Okay, this next question was specifically for Josh, but I think either of you could chime in if you want. This is from Pam McDonald, talking about gender identity. Question is, do you support the House legislation introduced just recently on 220 to remove gender identity as a protected class from the Iowa Civil Rights Act?
That bill was dropped Thursday. I have not had a chance to look at it. I will have a difficult time supporting that, but I haven't read through the bill yet, so I want to do that. But I'm certainly leaning no.
This might be one of the rare situations where I've actually read a House bill that the House has not. I'll be frank, I'm supportive of the concept, and I kind of go back to, this has been a long issue with the Iowa legislature for the fact that I remember back in 2019 or 2020, sometime in spring, we were still in session, we first got notified, there's probably around a dozen or so individuals that are incarcerated in prison, the Iowa correction system, that were suing the state to have sex change surgeries paid for by a taxpayer. And I've always been pretty clear that this is not a topic I have a whole lot of opinions on, but the two hard ones I do have is that taxpayers should not be on the hook for funding these sex changes, as well as waiting to 18 for young individuals to make those determinations, right? So on the one hand, I think the House bill does meet those criteria. There's some things there about education. I guess I don't understand necessarily some of the components in there, but I've been very clear all along from day one, no taxpayer funding and wait until you're 18. So from that standpoint, I guess I do temporarily support legislation, but I get some questions on some of the language there. I just don't understand what that means, but I guess we'll hear more here on that.
Okay, and then Dan, this next one's specific for you, but Brent, you can chime in. This is from Akiza Laverne, sorry if I'm not getting your name correct, on talent retention. Question is, how will you keep young and educated people here when our laws tend to strip rights for multiple groups?
I guess that's, I appreciate the point of the question, but I would have to say that it's all from your particular viewpoint as well too, right? I hold a viewpoint that not all talent is retained in the state based upon what the social issues are out there, which is why I've always tried for the last 9 years, kind of on day one, as to how do we build a state that everyone wants to live in, grow their family, and have a business, right? If we have a tax climate, per se, that businesses just won't come here and they're going to go plant over in Omaha, that's not helpful to be building the businesses out to try to actually have some talent here, right? When it comes to quality of life issues that Brent and I both have, fought for around here, whether it be parks, trails, things along those lines. Those are things that people, younger generations want to actually enjoy and participate in around here. And it's up to us to try to help, partner with county and locals there, as well as the state level too, to make sure we have some of those amenities there. I think there's a lot bigger viewpoint, is I would hold one as to how talent is attracted and retained in the state. For instance, Iowa County Development Authority, we're looking at trying to rebuild the entire tax credit system, and I give Debbie Durham a lot of credit on that. Part of that is we're trying to update some of these basic startup company abilities out there, and we call the angel investor credit, right? For basically, individuals, we have a lot of neat stories throughout the state that need a little seed money. If they can flip that to be something else, it really builds out, when we talk about technology jobs and things along those lines there. Those are things that we're trying to do to diversify this economy. So I think we're doing a lot of good things to actually attract that. I understand some people have a viewpoint that the social issues are the line in the sand, and it's whatever side you're on, talent thing. But I just think we're doing a lot of things in the state to really mark ourselves to be one best in the nation.
Yeah, I basically concur with those comments. There's so many things that we're trying to do, ranging from quality of life issues, correct, child care, early childhood education, tax system, quality of life opportunities, tourism, and things of that nature to help retain and attract people here. Iowa is still at an extremely good place and highly ranked in terms of raising a family, and I think we need to continue to focus on those areas.
Okay, next one's from Joel Driver on mental health. Question, how are ways you're going to protect the mental health services in Council Bluffs and the surrounding areas?
Are we going to protect them?
How are we going to protect the mental health services?
I just had a long conversation with our region director here last night. I'm going to, here's what I will say, right? And the reason why I'm going to be kind of limited here is because I have some follow-up conversations to have with DHS this next week here. And so I think it's probably appropriate as opposed to DHS director reading something in the news. I have a frank conversation on a few things. That being said, I will say this. Mental health is going through a variety of changes here in the state. I'm not sure if I like all the direction things are going, but I will say this. Mental health funding, as well as how we're synchronizing services, is a lot further along here now than it was 5 years ago. And I think everyone, depending on whatever this newest iteration is now, everyone can agree upon that. I think people that come to these things for a while would certainly recall some of my fervor back in 2021 when literally we were funding mental health based upon what zip code you were in and what the discussion was on the local property tax levies. So we had a vast discrimination built into code where a lot of tax groups were essentially dictating how much the mental health funding would be here in the state for a variety of economic reasons, and I'll leave it here at that. One of the best things that we ever did, and I'll still hold true to this date, is that we basically ripped out that entire funding system. And the system has a lot more money, tens of millions of dollars pouring into it now than it was just 5 years ago. That being said, that kind of caused a cascade effect on things throughout the system, because what we since found is that as we rebuilt the funding structure and raised the funding for all Iowans and made all Iowans equal and how they, dollar for dollar mental health service, we found that there were some regions out there that were dramatically failing. And again, the regional map, this is kind of in the past here a little bit, I'm just giving a quick little history. The mental health regions were constructed basically on who wanted to pay what on property taxes, not on where the services were at, not on a regional approach, or nothing along those lines. So when we ripped out the funding and it essentially exposed a larger problem where some of these regions were not delivering anything at all. What they were delivering was certainly not aligned with what was required by state code, but certainly wasn't a quality product. So therefore, the state started getting, we had multiple lawsuits where the state was on the liability for something that we were funding, but we had no administration actually making sure the quality was there. We had state laws saying the region you have to provide this, and we were pouring money to the regions there, but the regions weren't doing it. The regions did take financial responsibility. The state got put on the hook. So therefore, this last a year ago, we passed a larger mental health bill to basically regionalize the system, which I think the spirit of the bill is still the right thing, because we have some regions that the state did not come in that would absolutely fail. They did not have the skill or the ability to actually deliver a service, and there's a better service out there for those residents. That being said, some things that have occurred here with how it's become less of a region and more of a statewide format is where my conversations will go towards next week. So When it comes to, I think, answering the question, you do have people here that are acutely aware of what is going on to this date here, but I still have to come back to where we started off at was, from a statewide standpoint, was abysmal on how we funded it and how we provided services. And we're going to have to work through some of these issues further. And I'll put my thoughts there.
Yeah, and I concur with what he said. I've also met with the people involved here in Potawatomi County. And there's one specific thing that is of some concern. Potawatomi County has a pretty unique, to a degree, mental health program with our jail system, which is important. And we're going to make sure and raise that issue that is somehow allowed to continue to move ahead. But to the point how we're going to protect it, the supervisors, county supervisors have been very active in this, and the chair of the House Human Services Appropriations Committee, Representative Dan Meyer, has told them, please come to the point, let's sit down, let's get these questions fleshed out, and then we could talk to the Department of DHS about some of them. Having said that, we're going to try to address some of those things. This law that called for the mental health redesign of the system, which, you know, when you see failing parts of the state, you try to address that, and sometimes there are some unintended consequences to some areas that are doing well, and this would be one of those instances. I believe, I don't know, I'll go back and check, that mental health redesign system passed probably pretty much unanimously, as I recall, because it's the right way to go, but there are certainly some things there that in particular regions probably benefited more, and some other regions would have some things that they didn't like as well. So those questions have been raised, and we are, we're going to have that meeting whenever the supervisors arrange that, and we'll make sure those concerns are heard. But the law has been passed and it's already being implemented. I don't agree with all of it, but it certainly, the intention was good. And in terms of funding, as Senator Dawson said, over the past 5 years, we have put a substantial amount of new money in mental health, but it's not enough. Mental health is one of the biggest problems facing us from kindergarten on up. And so we'll continue to focus on that. But we'll make sure that the concerns are heard at the state level and do what we can to maybe modify some of that.
Okay, next one is from Patricia Fuller. It's about pesticide immunity. Question is, do you support giving Bayer immunity from lawsuits by protecting them versus people's rights to sue?
I'll start with this one here. Anytime we deal with these tort issues, these are always kind of messy issues to begin with here. Because it all depends on what side. In some ways, it's like it's a little political vacuum as to what's real, what's not, and where the truth lies in the middle a little bit. That is going to be a conversation that continues here. For those who don't know, what happened is a few years ago, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, bear with me, the state of California, one of the courts out there, well, actually, back it up here, right? So anytime you put a product to market, particularly in this case right here, there has to go through a bunch of FDA approval, and then you put your label warning on there, right? So these aren't just random products out there. They're things that have allegedly gone through some government testing. Now, the asterisk is always that, things change, right? And like 20, 30 years down the road, you can find things that people did see when the FDA originally tested those things. But while this court case is going on out there, they're based in the California court, ended up creating an exception that kind of upended the tort system a little bit, saying, well, a manufacturer warning does not constitute as a defense. So what I want to say up front is that this is not immunity for the pesticide companies, and I will give you an example. If you go out and you never want to do this to you, Tim, but let's say I got drunk one day and I ended up stabbing Supervisor Whitman, and I was intoxicated. It was proven I was intoxicated. I am not, I still am criminally charged and culpable for what I did to Tim here. It just means that those crimes of a specific intent, that diminishes those. So it would go from, I don't know, pick her from involuntary manslaughter, voluntary to involuntary manslaughter, yes, something along those lines there, right? So what the bill does, and it's going to be discussion, we had it after last year as well too, is that it allows, if there's a manufacturer, which is under three things that, so if the federal government provides some study to say that, this is a warning, but here is, and yes, I'm the butcher here, the fact that a label on the product, it is a certain defense. It is not an immunity claim, because there are still ways those manufacturers can be held civilly liable for it. And I think, and again, so once you get past that hurdle and people will say, well, what about this, what about that? Those are all things we're taking in to account up there. But again, a lot of things that we do, whether it be CO2 pipelining or, pork, the bacon issue out in California, it seems like there's a lot of things that start out there that other, that just create some bad effects out there. And because we're an ag economy and there's frankly a lot of pesticides used out there, that becomes a concern for a lot of our farmers out there as to what products they have available at their disposal there. So anyways, I leave it at that. I think it's a topic we absolutely have to deal with. Where the truth lies in the middle, I don't know. Because clearly there can be some issues associated out there in the health side too. But it's never lost on me that a lot of the push on these things is trial attorneys who make a lot of money off it, and essentially half the legislature, it seems like things we deal with are a lot of times billable hours inside the Judiciary Committee. So, but it is not immunity. It is a defense that is provided in the bill to limit some of those liabilities there, but it's not total immunity.
I'm not avoiding the issue, but I truly haven't decided yet. It's a very complicated issue, as Dan just said. Some of it is happening because of what the FDA allows to go on the label, which isn't strong enough, and that's wrong. FDA needs to change that and make sure that it's very specific in terms of what the product could do. And basically, it's Roundup that farmers use. I think 70% of Roundup in the nation is produced in Iowa. And so on one hand, you have something that's very essential to the farm economy, which has been used by and large safely, but there are some cases where there is some information that would say that there's some cancer link there, and so that's certainly valid. And the concern on that side of the issue is that if we don't provide some type of limited liability, that Bayer would close down the Monsanto plant, nobody would produce it in the U.S., and we'd start bringing in that type of product from China, where we have no idea what they're putting in it. So there's that side of the issue. The other side of the issue is that Bayer bought Monsanto however many years ago, knowing full well that liability is there, and I'm not particularly inclined to give a multinational corporation immunity for something that they knew when they bought it. But you have to weigh those out. So that's kind of where I'm leaning that way, but it's a huge issue for our farm economy and our farmers, and so I need to still work my way through it, but it is going to come up, so there will be a vote at some time. I'll settle in someplace, but I have a real difficult time protecting a foreign multinational corporation when they should have known that and didn't know that going in. But I still am considering the other side and listening to both sides. But at some point, we'll make that decision.
Okay, next one's from Naomi Corey. It's on speed limits. Any progress on raising rural highway speed limits and/or interstate speed limit?
Not so far. I personally, particularly on the rural roads that are adequate, I think there could be an increase in speed limit. Perhaps also on our interstates. Nebraska is at 75, which of course means 85. We're at 70, which of course means 80. But I'm not. I could support a modest increase, but so far I haven't seen anything. I think there's a bill out there, but it hasn't been very active so far. I could support something, but I'm not sure it's going to be an issue that comes up this year.
Yeah, there is a bill out there. I was on the transportation committee, so unfortunately I'm not speaking to that issue there. I think it did make it out. I think it might have raised the speed limit from 70 to 75. I'm not sure where that sits in the overall committee there. It's not made to our caucus yet. Like I said, the data supports, I really have no problem for a modest increase along those lines, but we'll kind of wait to see what the chair decides.
Yeah.
Just as an aside to that, the hands-free bill is very much like, at least in the House, it's come out of committee. They're trying to put the votes together. They're doing a blue card. If you ever, that's terminology in the legislature, if you hear the term blue card, you have these little blue cards that have all Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other side. When you have a bill of some controversy, you count the votes. So you blue card people, if you ever hear that term, you mark yes or no there. So the blue carding, the hands-free thing, which I support, public safety officials and everybody else supports, even though there's some issues with it. It looks like it may have enough votes, but there's still a couple of votes short. So that's just an aside with the transportation.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, the next one is from Deanne Hathaway. It's about accountability with nursing homes and Medicare spending. It's just a little bit of a lengthy question here, so hopefully I'll get through this one. Okay, there's an increase of $25 million in Medicaid dollars that's going to flow into the Iowa nursing homes in 2025. So the question is, how do you address allegations that there is no transparency on these tax dollars that are spent? Nursing homes can spend Medicaid dollars on executive salaries and funding political action committees.
What I can say, and number one, I know that whatever the organization is, Nursing Home Association, what have you, I guess they do have a political action committee, which means they contribute money, but that would be from money that's donated by people involved in the industry. That's not taxpayer money, except by, that job, I guess you could say that's taxpayer money, but it's private funds that go in there as far as I know. So everybody has, from teachers to carpenters and to doctors and everybody else, has political action committees, and they, whether you like them or not, those exist. The $25 million, we have Department of Inspection and Appeals. I do think we probably need, we need to beef that up. I'm not sure that the inspections are taking timely, being done in a timely fashion, but in terms of, I think we've had 44, I believe, nursing homes closed in the last 6 months or something, and so it's a critical issue. We have the gray tsunami coming. The baby boomers that are reaching 85 this year, nursing homes are going to be more and more critical. So I do think that Department of Inspection and Appeals probably needs more inspections. They probably need to have more oversight of our nursing homes. But in terms of council laws, I've not heard much here, but there are some nursing homes out there that are bad actors, and we're going to need to have money going into that nursing homes, some Medicaid money. The governor recommended $25 million to keep those open so we can provide those services.
Yeah, I think, in some ways, nursing homes are no different from child care, right? Where if there isn't some support, that's the government recommendation, $25 million, this becomes cost prohibitive, right? And then if it's cost prohibitive, as Brent mentioned, we're already having 47 nursing homes closed across the state, and that trend will continue there. But if you have a loved one and you're out in a rural area particularly, the ability to have that care there when someone might still be working with someone along those lines to take care of a loved one becomes greatly diminished. So that is, like I said, we go from child care too, right? Where we want to fund it, but there's always the oversight as well too. Is like, are those services being provided? Can be better, and so on and so forth. And that's a legit concern there. But very much the $25 million, we're already seeing, I think you can kind of make a case of two different things. We started to provide more monies for the last few years for child care out there, and I think the options are becoming more available than they were a few years ago. They're not great, but they're certainly more available. Where the nursing homes, if there is not some support there, we're going to continue to see mass closures there on that. And that's an interesting way to put it, the great tsunami, but it is a real thing that we're trying to grapple with in the legislature.
Actually, the term is silver tsunami.
Silver tsunami, there you go.
I messed it up.
Okay, so the next one is from Thomas Rudin. And I think this is on the repeal of the National Recreation Trust Fund. So it's on the SJR 6. Okay?
I'll take that one.
Okay, hopefully I'm gonna get this question right, so Thomas, help me out if I need to restructure this.
Yeah.
Question is, what's your position on SJR 6, and if in favor, what's your thoughts on that, justifying that, and because Iowa's been the last in the nation at public laws?
I'm going to take it, and I'm going to be thoughtful but pointed on my words here. Actually, sorry, we'll get a history lesson here first, and then I will answer the question because I'm still grappling with some. Now, you'll understand my feelings here on that in a minute. And between 2007 and 2010, if people don't already know, to amend the Iowa Constitution every 2 years to the General Assembly, a proposal that has to be exact same language has to make it through 2 different General Assemblies to where it will then be presented to the voters at the ballot box. And when it's presented to the voters at the ballot box, then it will either be ratified or it will be stricken down. I think it's a very smart process and it provides some stability in our Constitution here in the state. During that time frame, we had what was called the Iowa Water Land Legacy Act, which was debated and presented. And what it was a question proposed to the voters, saying that if the sales tax was to go up 3/8 cents, then that first 3/8 cents would go into what we call IWIL, or the Water Land Legacy Trust. There's a variety. There's a formula there: trails, buffer strips, water quality, a variety of, not only just like a lot of outdoor programs that, again, going back to how we build a state out to be a better state. I think this would meet that spirit support. This was not a question that was snuck by the voters back in 2010. And actually, it was widely supported by 64% of the voters. From my Ways and Means standpoint, what I've been very frustrated on is that the legislature went through all those hoops to get that to the voters and had no dang plan whatsoever as to how to actually implement it. So for the better course of 10 years, and that was on both sides of the aisle, because I went back and looked through all the bill requests, and it's strikingly, it's kind of offensive a little bit where we go through all that thing to put a question for the voters, and the proponents of that never had a plan to actually then present that next year and say, how would you make this work, right? So in 2019, 2020, the governor finally, Governor Brent decided we were going to put forward a proposal there, to which was a straight sales tax increase, which would fund IWIL, provide some mental health monies, and then there was an income tax cut in conjunction with that. And then we went to COVID, that proposal failed, and then coming out of there, 3 years ago, I presented a proposal forward. I'm not going to go into those details there, but if there's one thing I am happy about or proud of, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, for the first time in 13 years at that point, was the only committee ever from Democrat or Republican control ever voted on and passed out a proposal to actually implement that law. So here's where we go. As people might be aware of, the legislature is going to get involved into a property tax discussion here. And for the last few years, the Iowa Farm Bureau, and the Iowa Farm Bureau is very active against IWIL back in 2010. I appreciate the concern of land acquisition, but there are a lot of issues far more detrimental to the Iowa agricultural economy as opposed to just the small issue of land acquisition. So the Iowa Farm Bureau decided to, I'm going to leave it here. They decided to say, well, we want to help out the property tax discussion. So what they cooked up was a proposal to eliminate the IWIL provision inside the Iowa Constitution and say, instead of the first 3/8 cents goes to funding the trust, it shall go to a very specific property tax reduction formula. I think it is horrible tax policy. I think as far as it goes on constitutional language, it reads like garbage. And I think that this proposal is essentially an I will killer that's disguised as a Trojan horse inside the vein of property tax reform, which you can still make the case that does nothing more than I will does, because all it is if it goes up, then this shall happen, and there's no property tax reform inside of it. I absolutely do not support this proposal, and I think it's unfortunate that this is brought to us by the Iowa Farm Bureau. So,
I do not support SJR 6.
Okay.
That's our last question. So, we're gonna wrap up. I'm gonna hand it back to Chris. Thank you, to both Dan and Brent. So you can have some time if you want to do meet and greet afterwards. We want to give enough time for that.
Please help me thank Kelsey for my work. And thank you to Senator Dawson and Representative Siegrist for being here this morning. We do have a few more minutes for meet and greet after. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to talk to Mr. Siegrist or Mr. Dawson. I do have a few questions we didn't get to that I will deliver to the representatives for follow-up. Our next legislative coffee will be March 8th. That is the day after the first funnel deadline, so there should be plenty to report back on. We'll see you then.